everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to be reviewing 90 Day Fiance The Other Way, and this is season 4, episode 1. Let's go. So episode 1 is very much a introduction. It sort of introduces all of the couples, almost all. I think that there's 2 that they didn't introduce yet, but it sort of goes through and introduces a bit about their backstory, how they met, and then a couple of the couples we sort of get to see them getting ready to move in preparation. So this episode is a lot of introduction, but yeah, anyway, let's go. So we open on Chris, and Chris is I didn't write down how old she is actually. I think at some point it says, but she's probably in her 50s, I would guess. She's from a small town in Alabama, and they introduce her by showing her like going to the mailbox, and she's wearing like little fairy wings, and then she shows off all her onesies that she has and all that, which I thought was actually kind of cute. I think they were maybe trying to show that she was a little quirky and weird and add a bit of interest to her character, which is fine. But yeah, it was a little odd, but it's okay. We all have our little quirks, so that was fine. So she has had several, I think 2 marriages, and she has 2 kids. And then the last couple years, she tried online dating, and she met Jamie, who is originally from Venezuela, I believe, but now lives in Colombia. And I think there's actually 2 of the couples that live in Colombia, which I don't know if that's a coincidence or if they were just like, we're filming in Colombia. Is there anyone else here? It's a little weird. Who knew? Colombia, hotbed, dating hotbed. Yeah, so Jamie and Chris, and this is Chris's first serious relationship with a woman. She opens up about how she's always been bisexual but been in a straight relationship, and they have been in a relationship for 1 year, I believe. And I don't think any of the couples have met in person just because of COVID and that sort of stuff. She then showed went through a lot of her sort of packing up, getting stuff ready to go. One of the things I noted is she was showing off stuff that she was selling, and she had like a stud muffin cake pan, which I don't even know where you get that, but it was kind of funny. I was like, I would buy that and never use that ever. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of drama with Chris and Jamie yet. They sort of hint that there was possibly a bit of like cheating, infidelity, something, but they've obviously been online, they've never met, so I'm sure they've had some ups and downs in their relationship. And then the push for Chris to move to Colombia and not wait for Jamie to come to the US is because Jamie got COVID at a certain point, and she got really sick and was hospitalized, and that really like freaked Chris out, and so she was like, I want to be with her, I want to move, and so that was sort of the pushing point for her. Next couple opens up on what I thought was a hilarious shot of New York. They sort of did like idyllic New York, you know, black and white, very romanticized, and then it was like the reality of New York with honking taxi cabs and all that sort of stuff. And it cut to Danielle, who was saying how much she hates New York, or that she has a love-hate relationship with New York, and she really wants to move to Dominican Republic, which is where her husband is. Not fiance, not boyfriend, husband. I always love when these couples like quickly get married and then move back to whatever country they're from. And I get it, I'm sure it's for like ease of getting visas or getting back into the country, but I'm just, as someone personally who's very like, for me, marriage is kind of like a one and done deal. And so for these couples who just flimsily are like, marriage, 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 I'm like, no judgy, but that's a choice. Yeah, what did I put? Oh, she made a note about how her favorite thing about New York is her access to good skincare, which I was like, you don't live in a prissy bubble place. Like, you can get good skincare most places in North America or around the world. You can probably get better skincare in like South Korea or somewhere. But anyway, I thought that kind of funny. So Danielle is a history teacher, which they like never talk about again. And then she's also a yoga instructor, which they talk about a lot. Uh, she was previously married, and I believe she had a child, although I don't know if she ever sees the child because they also never mentioned that again, which was weird. So she took a trip to the Dominican Republic, and there's where she met Johan, who was a fitness instructor or teaching a class or something at the resort. And long story short, they fell in love, da 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 da, and then they got married. And they are sort of, they seem to have a lot of differences in their beliefs and what they want out of life. And so that already is like a big red flag to me. I'm like, this is not going to go well. Like, having different spiritual beliefs is one thing, if that's the only thing, but they have several things. And the big thing, which comes up more later, is that Johan does not want to live in the Dominican Republic. He's been very open about wanting to move to the US. And that may or may not happen. Then Danielle has that sort of conversation with her friends about like, oh, are you sure what you know what you're doing? Da 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 da. You know, the typical 90 Day Fiance conversation. And one of her friends mentioned something really funny where she's like, are you sure he's not just like, I don't know if like into or like a thanky panky? Which she then thankfully described as someone who works at a resort and looks for tourists to provide them with like money and visas and that sort of stuff. And I was like, oh, interesting. Interesting. We'll see. Next couple, we get introduced to actually the person who's not in the US. We get introduced to Rishi, who is in India. And I mean, the first thing I said about him out loud was, wow, he has really great hair. And then they spent like several minutes describing his hair care routine, and he went through like what he has to do, and that it takes him, I think, like an hour and a half to wash his hair every other day. And I mean, it's nice hair, so I get it, but also. And then he started describing his qualifications, that he is, right now he works as a fitness instructor. Also seems to be a common theme this year. And then that he was a lawyer. I think he went to school to be a lawyer, passed the bar, all that, worked as a lawyer for a few years, but decided that wasn't really the career for him, so went back into fitness world. And he also, shocker to no one, he models. Yes, he models. It's the models, guys. Be wary of the models. Actually, I don't know. He seems okay, but I also love that he talked about how he never has to like ask out women. They just approach him all the time, which is fair. I could see that happening a lot, but also it's a little bit like, just, I have so many women that love me. Anyway, then we meet his fiance, who's in the US, and her name is Jen. And she currently lives on her parents' farm. So they've got like shots of her on the tractor and all that sort of stuff. She's in her 40s, so she's about 10 years older than Rishi. And not that that's a bad thing. And she sort of begins describing her personality, like that she likes to travel, she's always been a bit adventurous, she's lived a lot of places, so she seems like someone who would go to another country and meet someone, and like that seems reasonable for her personality type. She also has a track record of falling in love with the wrong men, the wrong type of guys. So we're gonna see if history is going to repeat itself. She met Rishi in a hotel lobby in India, you know, sort of seeing someone across the room and saying, "Oh, you," and then having that moment, and then you get to talking. And hilariously, she did say that when she first met him and he talked about modeling, she was kind of like, "Oh, pass, no thank you." And then I guess they kept texting or whatever, and she got to know him, and she's like, "Okay, maybe I'll give him a chance," which I found was funny and the right call, by the way. But anyway, and then of course with COVID, she couldn't move back right away, so they've kind of had their relationship on hold for about 2 years, but they are engaged, so we'll see where that goes. And then of course the conversation with her family and her brother doesn't seem to be on board, but we'll see what happens. So our next couple, we are introduced to Gabriel, and I do love how they always try to find like the unique factor about each person. But Gabriel, we're introduced to him by way of his business and what he does. And he basically designs and creates underwear for men, so like women who've transitioned to be men. And there's a lot of talk and description about like how to do the underwear, how they make them, all that sort of process, which I'm not super interested in, but it seems helpful. He lives in Florida, 32 years old, and he went to Colombia about a year ago for his business to find suppliers, and that's where he met Isabel. And so they have mutual friends, and they met, and sparks flew, and instant chemistry and all that. And then Gabriel sort of drops the bomb that he's like, "Oh, and I had to tell her right away that I was trans." And I jaw dropped. Like I mean, I should have guessed it, but also no, did not. Did not see that coming. And I sort of get the sense that that's kind of going to be their big drama and twist. Not that she doesn't support him, because she seems to really be supportive, but there seems to be a lot of drama about like telling her family. So we're going to see if that's going to be like their main drama for the season, or if there's something else. I'm not sure. Yeah, but they have I think they're not engaged yet. He wants to get engaged. But he has been going back and forth to Colombia to be with her, and she has 2 kids. Apparently they get along really, really well. So cute little family dynamic going on. Yeah, and so we're gonna see a lot of the drama does seem to be around telling her family, so we'll see where that goes. So now we go back to Danielle, and Danielle is at lunch with her friends, and she started telling them that she plans to move to the Dominican permanently. She's not coming back. And they ask, of course, the question of like, "What are you gonna do for work? What's your plan?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't know, like I'll just sit on the beach, or like I could teach yoga on the beach, or..." And her friends are like, that's not a life plan, that's not a job. And then she sort of, I think she says like, they're like, "Well, what are you gonna do?" And she's like, "I don't know, I'm just gonna manifest it." And I was like, okay, I don't think this is gonna last long. And then what I think the real drama of her and Johan's relationship is sort of got dropped. And she said that he really wants to move to the US, and he thinks that she applied for the whatever it is, the Fiance visa, whatever that, I don't know what it's called, but I should. And she admits that she has not, and that she doesn't plan to, because she wants to live in the Dominican. And I was like, this is not gonna go well. This is not gonna go well at all. if I had to put my feelers out for a couple that's not gonna last to the end of the season, Danielle and Johan. Okay. Then we go back to Colombia and we meet Jamie, who is Chris's fiance. And we get introduced to her, and she's sort of trying on lingerie, shall we say. And she's having a conversation with the shopkeeper or whatever about how her girlfriend is coming to the country, and I think sort of trying to show that Colombia is a very open place. And then she talks a lot about her personal experiences in her relationships, that she hasn't had good relationships in the past, and she hasn't had good relationships with men, and that she is very, very lesbian. That's her thing, which is fine. And it was kind of sad. She said she told her friends, but she never told her parents. And she'd never really planned to, and that actually made me quite sad. Like, she seemed very heartbroken about that. Yeah, and then she sort of talked about meeting Chris online, that I think Chris proposed like a month after they met online, and she's very, very excited. And then they have a talk with her and her friends, and the drama starts, and she sort of admits that around the time of her birthday, I think a year ago, 6 months ago, something like that, Chris ghosted her for a period online of like a month. And Jamie was feeling really sad and upset and lonely and all that sort of stuff. And so she went and started talking to another woman from Texas. And I don't think that went anywhere, but I think that caused a little bit of friction in their relationship. So we'll see if that's just a stumbling block or something more. And then we go back to Danielle and Johan. And Danielle is getting ready to fly to the Dominican Republic. And we get to meet Johan. So he is a personal trainer. He's 32 years old. He's very tall, like at least like 6'3", 6'4", I don't know. He's very tall, and Danielle is very short, which is kind of cute. We got lots of cute scenes of like him. He's studying English because he really wants to work in the US. Flag, 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 flag going up everywhere. Anyone? I was just thinking the whole time, I was like, oh, you poor soul. You poor soul. Like, he seems so honest and open about that. Like, it's not something that he's been trying to hide or like use her for. Like, he does seem to genuinely like Danielle, but he's also very honest about being like, I don't want to live here. This is not a great place to live. This is not a place with like, you know, you work and you barely make enough money. And he's like, I want to live somewhere where there's more possibilities. And to him, that's the US. So I'm a little angry at Danielle. But anyway, he goes to the airport to pick her up, and he brings flowers, and it's very cute, and you know, they seem so happy and all that sort of stuff. And then they have this awkward interaction in the airport where production is interviewing them, and like he doesn't speak very much English at all, and so they're sort of standing there and they're like cutely just standing there, and she's talking in English, and she's like, yeah, no, we have a lot of stuff that we have to talk about on this trip. She's like, mostly how I have to tell him that he's never going to the US. And he sort of looks down at her, and you can tell he doesn't understand what she's saying, but he's like, oh, like what? And she's like, ha 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 ha. And I was like, girl. This is gonna go so well. Then we go back to Gabe, and Gabe is getting a tattoo of Isabel's name on his arm, and his sister sort of comes in. We get a bit of family interaction, and she makes a really funny comment where she's like, oh, so did you get the old tattoo of your old girlfriend removed? He's like, yeah, I'm getting it like blacked out. She's like, oh, so you're getting this new tattoo to prove that you love this new person as much as you love the person you previously got a tattoo of. And I think she meant it in kind of like a sassy sort of way, but it was funny. They do seem to have a good relationship though, and that was nice to see. Then we go back to Chris, and she is preparing her house to move. I think she plans to rent out part of her house. There was a bit of backstory about like her buying a house and then part of it burning down, and then I don't know, she bought another house, or it was a little confusing. But she's renovating this house. I don't know. I think she has quite a bit of money. She said she like ran a company for a while. She has a couple properties. I mean, houses and land in Alabama is not super expensive, but I mean, if you own a couple houses, you own a couple houses. Um, and then her mom sort of talks a bit about Chris's health issues. She has narcolepsy. And sort of, is that going to be a concern for her being in a foreign country? And like, is that a concern for Jamie? And then they did talk a bit about how it seems like Chris has been supporting Jamie a little bit and sending her some money, which is fine if that's your relationship. I mean, someone in the relationship, whether one person or both people, do have to earn money. It's just kind of the trade-off for that, and what you know, how you structure your relationship. But we'll see if that's a flag. And then we get to end off the episode with Danielle and her scheming. And they're sort of in the car, her and Johan, and they're talking about their plans for the week. And she says she wants to find an apartment, like somewhere to stay. And he's like, oh, for a year? And she's like, well, no, I kind of want to stay here longer. And shock of all shocks, Johan is not super happy about that. And then he sort of goes into why he doesn't want to live in the Dominican Republic. And she's like, well, you know, New York isn't that great. Like, it's expensive, you know, it's noisy and loud, and there's lots of people and all this sort of stuff. And I just kept thinking to myself, I'm like, you don't have to live in New York. Like, you could go to the US and live somewhere else. You don't have to live in New York. Apparently, she feels they have to live in New York or the Dominican Republic, and those are their only two options. But anyway, and then she kind of hit him with, oh, well, you couldn't work there anyway because you don't really speak English very well. And I was like, he is trying. He is learning. Leave him alone. This is his dream. Anyway, we're gonna see. I do not think, if I had to put money on one relationship that's not gonna last, I think Danielle and Johan they are headed for big trouble. Big trouble. But we'll see. We'll see. I think there's still another couple couples we haven't been introduced to, and hopefully we will be introduced to them in episode 2. So I will see you next time for that. Thanks. Bye.